Hello, everyone. I hope you're well, playing on and making the games that you all love. You're joining me, your host, Max Pears. But not just me. You don't get to hear my smooth jazz. You also get to hear from an incredible level designer, someone else who's going to put a pep in your step, Mr. Shane Canning. How are you doing, sir?
Hello, hello. Pretty good. It's a nice weekend. It's warming up. The weather's warming up, so it's fun to stay inside and build levels.
Yeah, that's it. You don't like sunlight, mate. Don't like sunlight. So... No, man, but it's great to have you on the show. Honestly, it's brilliant. For those who may not know about you, mate, do you want to give a small introduction about yourself?
Sure. So, yeah, my name's Shane Canning. I've been a level designer for around 13 years now in the industry. Started my career when I was 22 over at Disney, doing Disney Infinity. And after spending about 8 years there, I moved on to Insomniac Games, where I spent about 3.5 years. Did most of that on Spider-Man, but then did a good chunk of, like, say, 8 months on Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. And then after that, came over to Square Enix Japan, and I've just been working on an unannounced title since then.
That's amazing, mate. Like I said, you've worked on a range of different titles there, mate. Honestly, it's incredible. But first, let's have a quick word from today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is none other than me. What I've done, everyone, and I hope you're excited for this, is I've actually created a level design kind of store. What I've done in this store is put up different kinds of tips and tricks that you can find there, whether that be my actual ebook itself, to that of level design pamphlets focused on different things such as traversal, stealth, breaking into the industry, as well as different talks that I have done which you cannot find anywhere else other than on this store. So if you are looking to improve on your level design skills and processes, then check out the Level Design Store, which will be down in the description below, where there'll be a link to find this. All you need to do is head over to gumroad.com/level design lobby. I hope you like what you see, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Thank you, and now back to the show.
Yeah, I got kind of lucky. Disney had that Infinity team, but they would kind of bounce around in different projects. Like variety wise, for a level designer, I was getting to do like racing games with cars, and then Toy Story platforming, and then with Disney Infinity, it was like this open world toy box mode stuff, along with the linear stuff. And then especially at Insomniac, it's like doing Spider-Man and Ratchet and Clank, two very different types of games. So I feel like I've gotten to work on quite a lot of different type of things, and it's really lucky for a level designer not to get. I don't know. I think it depends on what kind of, person you are, what kind of games you like, but it's been really fun getting to do a lot of different things rather than kind of stuck into one thing.
No, man, and I think it's great also to always have a bit of variety on your CV as well, right? It's always a lot there. Exactly, and it's creatively different thinking as well. I want to ask briefly about Disney Infinity, because of the fact that, like you said, there's so much to that game, in the different game modes. And how was it designing, obviously, for the different styles, not only in terms of game types, but also character abilities?
Yeah, it was so fun. Getting the chance, like the first one I was put on was Cars. And so, you're gearing up thinking you're doing like, I don't know, Buzz Lightyear Star Command, I think is what we were working on before, right after Toy Story 3, before we kind of morphed that into what the toy box mode became with Disney Infinity. And so getting on Cars, it's like, okay, now I need to go find out how is it going to be fun to drive around and be a Cars character, without some of the mechanics that maybe I was anticipating, with just being like Woody or Buzz and running around that world, as a biped. We started thinking about all this other mechanics. So it was really fun to get to kind of explore that and be basically, I was like one of two level designers on the Cars playset as a whole. And so I had a lot of freedom of just like trying to find that fun in the game and getting to present that to the team and trying to sell everyone on the stuff we were working on.
That's awesome, man. And I wanted to ask, there, you saying like trying to find the fun, because obviously fun can mean so many different things. How did you go about that? Because we spoke a little bit off air about how much prototyping goes into level design. Can you iterate on that, mate?
Yeah, I mean, it is so crazy depending on which game you're getting on and how much time the level design team usually gets to, find out what we're going to be doing. And, maybe it's a game jam, or maybe it's, something less formal than that, where everyone's just kind of getting in the editor and putting things together and then showing everyone, and then whoever idea clicks the most kind of gets sent through. But on Cars versus maybe Cars 2, before that, we would do a lot of prototyping for the game modes of like capture the flag.
Mm.
What does that mean to that game? And we started prototyping things of like bomb delivery. Okay, it's like, oh, you're going to run into the bomb, and now you've got the bomb. You need to deliver it to their base, and that all that kind of stuff was prototyped by the level team that didn't exist before that, right? And we don't have a lot of
Yeah.
programmers sitting with the team giving us that. And so that's why it's really important for people to kind of get in the engine and find out what they can do with a bit of prototyping without the help of a programmer and some of these other team resources, and see what you can put together for gameplay, because a lot of times when we start these projects, it's up to the level team to kind of just go in guns blazing and try and figure something out. Even on Ratchet and Clank
Mm.
Rift Apart for Insomniac Games, we did a game jam, and everyone kind of put some ideas together, and one of my ideas for the game jam ended up being my actual level for the game. And so I
Wow.
kind of was just inspired by a thought of just like, I'd love to do something like this for Ratchet. And then I just wanted to prove that with a game jam. So I just built this level and had this like atmospheric feel for it. And I was like, what about this? And they're like, well, you're making that level for the game. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I wanted. And even I think it was Glitch they showed on a recent trailer, is this the
Yeah.
spider bot mechanic they have for some of the side gameplay in Ratchet. And
Mm.
that actually came out of the game jam, where one of the senior
Wow.
programmers put together some really cool procedural animation on the spider tank, and then I took that and started making some levels out of it. I'm like, oh, this is what I want to do as the side stuff, as the mini game stuff, instead of like I think they used to have this old laser puzzle thing to open doors. It's like,
Yes.
no, get rid of that, let's do something crazy here. And so that's what a lot of that was born out of. And so those kind of early prototyping are really important, and it's a really good way for level people to kind of take part in designing the actual game, right? And getting
Mm.
their voices heard. As long as they can try and sell those ideas, then they have a really strong chance, of feeling like a lot of ownership is theirs.
That's it, man. I completely agree, and I think
Mm-hmm.
also we spoke about this off there, but
Mm-hmm.
just how important scripting is. It is a whole other side of it, and
Yeah.
there, like you said, if you get a chance to just show, it's always that thing. Don't tell me, show me, especially in video games.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can get a simple prototype working, how far it can go, as you said, like turning that into your actual level,
Mm-hmm.
is just no bounds if done correctly.
Yeah. And that's funny you mentioned the show me, don't tell me. And that goes for
Mm.
so many different things, whether it's in portfolios, or prototyping and designing things, but also when you're designing a level, it's kind of like, if the player doesn't see it, then it didn't happen, because they're not going to really understand what you're trying to tell them usually, unless you kind of show them something visually.
Yeah.
A lot of like a really simple example is like, if an action happens, like giving them a camera cut to show that, like kind of what the reaction to that uh, you know uh, mechanic that they tried or did something with, like giving them the little camera look nudges like Gears of War used to do a lot.
Mm.
So yeah, it's just show the player things, don't tell them about it, because no one's reading anything most of the time. And especially that went for a lower demographic at Disney. We found out kids wouldn't read anything. They were just blazing through those menus. And
Wow.
so that's why we really fought to get some more dialogue and stuff. But it was really hard because the side missions, got scoped as far as the VO went. And so now you
Yeah.
have that challenge of like showing kids what to do, but not telling them. So it's crazy.
Yeah, man, it was an interesting one when I was working on the Division, because we
Mm-hmm.
had that issue of, because you couldn't really do cutscenes on that because you had a team of 4 players possibly
Mm-hmm.
playing online, and trying to frame certain actions where you hope all the players might see it was one of the biggest challenges, as you're saying, like
Mm-hmm.
try, even if you can't, because you can't fix their position. So that was
Yeah.
yeah,
That would
a
be an interesting
challenge.
challenge, because now that you mentioned that, I remember playing the Division. It's like,
Mm.
it, even just for a one player game, trying to make sure that player is getting to see all those things, it's kind of like our responsibility, right? Of just, if I'm
Yep.
doing like a linear level style playthrough of like a Uncharted game, or Tomb Raider or something like that, it's kind of up to the level designer to kind of dictate that geometry in a way
Correct.
that always kind of the player always gets back on track before you throw something at them, right? You don't want to kind of topple things on top of each other so that the player kind of misses out on things, or maybe you put things together too soon. You want to let those things breathe. And I think that goes
Mm.
all the way down to your level geometry of just letting the player enjoy the bottom of a staircase before it makes a turn, or platforming,
Yep.
having the rhythm of platforming happen where I'm spacing those out, where I can enjoy this jump before the other kind of mechanic jumps in my face and tells me I need to perform this.
Yes.
It's a
I think
juggling
that's
act.
exactly. I think that the pacing of it is one of the
Hmm.
hardest, especially like platformers. I remember I made a platformer years ago. It was
Hmm.
like a personal project on mobile, and and when I first put it together, I was like, oh, introducing this mechanic, and it's just like, what am I? When I look back, I'm like, what was I doing? Like I said, just that pacing of letting the player first figure it out, and Mario obviously does it so well. I mean, the history of that,
Hmm.
of just let the player learn, test, and then twist is always
Hmm.
incredible for it. So yeah, mate, just the overall. I think also with that geometry, like how we shape it as well, to whether that be to try to match the emotions of that level as well, is such an important part. Like getting the theming
Hmm.
too. I think it's a
Yeah, how do
challenge
you
in its
design
own right.
yours? When it comes to the theming and telling that like environmental storytelling, how much do you find yourself pushing things in the block out to kind of like sell that space? So when an artist shows up, they kind of have a better idea of what we're getting into, or do you kind of just go strictly design and mechanics, making sure everything plays perfectly, but doesn't, necessarily worry about selling the kind of world you're in?
So it obviously, like each studio, as we know, mate, has a
Mm-hmm.
different working and who is control of what.
Mm-hmm.
But like recently, I've gotten like really into this, and it's something I'm trying to do better now. Is I've got like all these books, and like the one I'm just picking up now is called How to Read Modern Buildings. But
Mm-hmm.
there's another one which I've got, which is something like the basics for different architecture,
Mm-hmm.
and just trying to look at different ones like brutalism, postmodernism, future modernism, and seeing if those shapes can help match that. So I first like have a
Mm-hmm.
sync with narrative to find, well, what is the theme? What is it that we're after? Is it, family, loss, joy? Try to figure that out. And then from there, I'll kind of like look, and for my career anyway, because I've worked on Division and then Cyberpunk,
Mm-hmm.
you're basing it in these very, they're not organic spaces. They're all very city urbanized spots, which is why I mentioned the architecture styles there, because I'm trying to look at what can fit into the city as well as what would actually try. If you want in the player to feel nervous or small, maybe you look at these more kind of brutalistic styles of Soviet Union buildings
Yeah,
and that,
it's
which
like
are
the Maze
very
Runner movie
soulless.
had a lot of cool
Yeah.
shapes like that.
So like I look at kind of that, and I will do like different blockouts for that. Use geometry, and it depends on certain ones. Like certain ones, I might go a bit more detailed with, but other ones, it depends what's like needed for the space. But I
Mm-hmm.
definitely try, have this, make sure my references are all up to the date so everyone can see them as well before I even start blocking it out. Make sure that's there, and then with the block out, I kind of go into more detail with each iteration. So it's first, it's a basic skeletal structure. And then
Right.
after that, like I might add more kind of architectural styles, like certain pillars and shapes to match that. And then think about how the player moves. Like if they're not in a place they're not supposed to be, then I make more tighter spaces. Maybe you crawl through. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's like 2 meters wide, so it feels very claustrophobic. These kind of things that I try to match with it, mate. So
That's really
sometimes it
cool.
works, sometimes it doesn't.
At Level Design Lobby, we believe everybody has a story to tell. Hobbyist or student, freelancer or veteran, we made it our mission to unite those who share our passion for creating and developing great games. Thanks to our generous Patreon backers, we've been able to do just that. So if you've already pledged your support, thank you. If not, you too can ensure the future of Level Design Lobby, helping us to create even more exciting content, collaborations, interviews, and much more. With awesome perks and rewards, whether you're a seasoned professional or just getting started, you're sure to find something for you. Want to share tips, tricks, and advice with passionate, like-minded developers? Our awesome community Discord has you covered. Fancy practicing your level design, creating strong portfolio content, and having fun? Then try our level design weekends. Or perhaps you want to individually discuss your work, hone your skills, or level up your career? Then consider our one-on-one mentorships. If you share our vision, then go to patreon.com/Level Design Lobby for more information and to pledge your support. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a good point you mentioned about just varying up your spaces and staying simple and then gradually adding layers. And something I actually see
Yeah.
the students at CGMA tend to
Mm.
do when they're newer is I tend to see people just put too much geometry in there, like huge buildings where I'm like, who's art in that? Like it's huge. Like really paying attention to what spaces are needed, what spaces can be like maybe a little side thing or a little
Mm.
alternate route, but then really honing in on that player's path of what's needed to sell my story and to facilitate some fun gameplay with using the mechanics of the game. I would say that's like the bare bones of level design is just can I make just a simple space where those mechanics happen to be pretty fun. I think looking
Yeah.
at Blocktober shots of something, what's that latest Star Wars game?
Oh, the
That
Fallen Jedi,
the
Fallen
one that
Order.
Respawn did.
Yeah,
Um,
Fallen Order, I think it was called.
Yeah, that game though, if you look at the Blocktober screens of that, it's really
Oh
interesting how
yeah, man.
simplified they keep it more simple than
Yeah,
I would have ever imagined. And I like for people to see the difference of that. Not every studio works the same way, right? So it's really
mm,
interesting to see how each studio works. Like at Disney, we worked in Maya, and so that gave the designers a lot more flexibility to just kind of block things out. And just based on their level of skill in Maya is how complicated those blockouts were. But everyone was trying to like, sell that fidelity a little bit to get people excited about the kind of ideas they were coming up
yeah,
with. Where Insomniac, we stayed in the tools. None of the designers worked in Maya, and so we're using a lot of basic shapes. Your primitive library, and you're trying to come up with that. Definitely makes it easier when you're doing Spider-Man because it's a real world, and so you're kind of keeping those
mm,
objects kind of like more in check. Whereas Ratchet and Clank, you can just pretty much build whatever you can think of, and so with that, you're just you're trying to come up with some fun shapes. And going back to what you mentioned with architecture, it's really fun to I always snap pictures around Tokyo, or every time I see
yeah,
like interesting buildings, I'm like, hey, that shape might work for something I'll do later, or maybe in the future I can use this as reference. And just finding that one shape that helps you kind of make an area look interesting, and trying to see how that can help. So I really like the how you gotta go through that process too.
yeah, mate. It's so interesting again looking at different people's blockouts because I
Hmm.
tend to talk years ago because obviously there aren't any conferences for a while now. But like the I think it's called Digital Dragons,
Okay.
and it was by one of the environment artists at Blizzard on Overwatch. And
Mm,
again, he showed the blockouts, and similar to that Star Wars game Fallen Order, they they were super simple as well.
really?
Very yeah, very
I've
like
never seen those. That'd be really interesting to see
yeah.
something Overwatch wise.
I can't remember who's put them out there, but honestly, mate, like at a certain point, I don't even think you could tell like what that was meant to be to where it came. I'm sure there's communication obviously to help that. We only
Hmm.
see like two shots next to each other, right? So it's a very different viewing point. But yeah, compared to, but it's the same when I went from Ubisoft to here. The
Right.
amount of detail we put in our blockouts for CD
Hmm.
Projekt Red, honestly, mate, is insane. Like we have,
Really?
yeah, because we have whole like LD props to sell what the space is. So if
Oh,
it's
that's
a
cool. I like
yeah,
having flexible
I think
libraries
it's
that kind of give you a little more oomph when you need it.
for sure. And that's one of the things that I tell like when I have students on my mentorship
Mhm,
because I say like no artist is coming to go out here. So and you'll see it in some of my own blockouts. I
mhm,
make LD it like maybe it's a table. I make that out of the color that I want cover to be,
mhm.
or like a vending machine. I'll do that, but just to help the space a little bit more. And that's okay there. But again, that was very detailed to what the division blockouts were like because we put blocks down and then it was like yellow for low cover, orange for
Mhm.
high cover. But we had references to speak to the artist, but you could tell the artist had more freedom because we'd be like, okay, well, I just need some form of cover here. It's in this space. Here's my references for the space,
Mhm.
and then they turn it into something beautiful. But yeah, it is fascinating again just seeing how different places work
Yeah.
and how
I,
much again detail goes
you
in.
made me you made me Google search Overwatch blockouts, and my mind is melting at how simple these are. Like this is
Mm,
crazy. Which I think for a multiplayer game though, it's even more important that they get the metrics right, and they actually
yes.
have that harder job of like making sure multiple characters with multiple mechanics
Oh,
actually can be utilized in those
yeah,
maps, right? So they're kind of giving those opportunities for flyers versus like people who just run on walls, or people who are just static on the ground the whole time. So it's just like really interesting, with their
yeah.
player paths and how probably they have to stay simple to make sure all that works. And the art for that game is amazing, so I really like seeing this kind of transition between blackout and art. It's really interesting looking.
Oh yeah, dude. And like you said, the thought process. I mean, I honestly feel like I'd be overwhelmed trying to play test for each,
Hmm.
character that they have, because the abilities are obviously great for that. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I've never gotten to work on a multiplayer specific
mm,
game. I almost got hired. I got an offer from Sledgehammer Games back when
oh wow.
Disney closed. So after that 8 years of Disney being around for me, that company had been around for over 20 years. Avalanche Software, and they had been working on like Nickelodeon games and TAC and some other stuff. And then Disney bought them out in 2008. Or not in 2006, and then I got there in 2008 and spent 8 years there. And then after Disney closed them, uh, Warner Brothers picked him up, and they're the ones
Mm.
now making that new Harry Potter game, that open world Harry Potter game,
Oh, okay.
which I think is the studio's first time using Unreal. Because once Disney shut down, they took the engine Octane with them, right? Because the rights
Huh.
go with them. So they actually let them finish Cars 3, because we were in the middle of Cars 3, the game, when it closed.
Right.
And so they let them finish that as like a deal for Warner to buy the studio, just to get something out quick. I think, and just kind of, it was, there's so much of that game done already. It would have been such a shame not to do it anyways. And so, instead of using Maya with the Octane engine plugged into it, like we had, that was scrapped. And now everyone had to, and the studio had to learn Unreal. So that was really interesting. I think that's why that game's taking some time to come out. It's just the whole studio had to ramp up on Unreal. And you know how that
Mm.
goes with just new tools, and
Yeah.
tools are such an important part of games. Like,
Oh
oh,
yeah.
it's crazy. It's
I don't
crazy
know.
dealing with tools that are different from your other studios.
I don't know if you ever watched. There's a great talk on GDC, and it's by a tools programmer or tools designer, and he's like breaking down like how if you just have something hidden in a Dropbox, and he's just like every time you click on this and then have to click on that, then it's 2 seconds longer for someone that could have been saved. And it was just such an interesting one because the amount of time and money when you think about like goes into
Hmm.
not only making the tools but then slowing you down as a tool user. It's insane and horrifying. Like I wouldn't want to see the bill at the end of that one, mate.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean,
jeez.
I think that was the expensive part of the Disney Infinity Studio, and what maybe led to some of the decisions for Disney as a company to say, hey, we don't want to own any game companies. We just want to let people use our IPs and let other companies do that, and that way we don't have to run our own companies for the games division side, because it's just
Mm,
really expensive to have that. And I
yes.
think we were an expensive studio, but our tools were pretty good. But it was like a proprietary tool set they've been working on that with that company for a long time. And so there was an in-house team that was always fixing it, upgrading it, and doing those things. And Insomniac was the same. They have their own engine, and that's Insomniac's engine is like one of the best engines I think exists for making games, and that's why they could put out
Wow.
Spider-Man and Miles and this Ratchet game. Like the tools are just amazing, and then the way the teams work together is really amazing there, and I think that makes a huge difference. When you can go to an animator and just be like, "Hey, I have this idea for this QTE, or I have this idea for the sequence, but I need your help to." Just to
Mm,
prove it, next week's review with all the directors, and we need to show them, like you said, we need to show them, not tell them, because a lot of times if you ask for stuff or you tell people about it, no one's going to let you have it, and it's not going to get
yeah.
in. But if you just go ahead and make that on your spare time or just within your time, and you're able to pitch that, I think you get a lot more ideas pushed through that way. Um,
No, but it is to me it is hilarious in terms of how like yeah, like just changing perspective and how you approach selling something can change a
mhm,
lot of the outcomes. Like what was it? So this is a funny story for me. So my lead was we were supposed to be like content was on lock, right?
mhm.
No more stuff.
Which means if I
And
get a bug sent to me, I might sneak in a fix with that bug. I do that a lot.
exactly. And so I had so he was going away, my lead, and he like looked at me because I was in charge of most of the like open world events.
Wow.
He's like,
Okay.
you don't put anything else in, all right? Just submit the bugs and that's it. And I was all right, boss. Have a good holiday. And there was this one friggin' event which was bugging me because it wasn't clear enough that this I can't even remember what it was. It was some sort of like weapons container or something that like you had to protect it. We had the health bar kind of going down with it, but like it needed to be clear that we could see the thing taking damage, and like
Hmm.
this was the box you were supposed to protect. So like I remember going off to art and sneaking in some sort of like destruction mesh on it, and also getting this like blinking light and props in there. And I remember him coming back afterwards, and he saw it and he's like, Max, did you just sneak in all this stuff? I was like, no.
That's
So
so
yeah,
funny. I love hearing
yeah.
stuff like that. Like on Spider-Man, we were, final. I swear it was like the final week or two, even. And there was a section on the opening mission, Fisk Tower. And we had this section where Spider-Man crawls under debris before you get like a QTE to help these people. And the
Mhm.
entrance to it just wasn't enough. Like it was lacking. And so one of the art directors came over to my desk and I'm just like, yeah, we never got around to that, did we? That's a shame. He's like, well, all right, move out of the way. Let's see something real quick. So he looks at some of the debris that's scattered in that area because there's a lot of destruction in Fisk Tower after an explosion goes off. And so he's grabbing some debris and he's noodling around with it. I'm like, hey, this looks pretty good. And so after he does that, I kind of go in. I'm like, all right, let's see if we can fix the collision, fix the trigger volume. So I start my crawl at the appropriate time. That kind of looks like I'm crawling under this debris. And we checked that in, and just no one really, no one really noticed. And then it was kind of
That's
nice to sneak
brilliant.
something like that in. But yeah, it was like, it's funny what kind of things you can sneak in at the end. And I like to joke, like, levels are never done. They just
No,
they just take it away from us. There's like, you can't work on this anymore.
that's it. And I always think it is a strange one with with that, because like you said, it's never done, and also there's always something that's like, niggling in the back of your mind
Mm-hmm.
of, oh, if I can just do a bit more, I can do this, etc. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny to see, when you run out of time at the end, the things that you'd like to polish and things like that. Like, I like combat especially, right? Or AI, the movements of
Mm.
that, the background animated stuff of like placing NPCs places and giving them some more animations and trying to fill in those scenes with some of the details and stuff like that. Because it's the more you get further along and play it, the more those things can evolve and change, and you might change your mind on different things. I think that's why it's really good for when people are starting levels, if they're newer to level design, to just really let it happen in layers and not try and do too many details too soon, because when you're backtracking and changing things, those changes become quite time consuming, and if you overcommit to certain things or get married to parts of the design, then it becomes quite hard to kind of iterate and make those better,
Mm.
and maybe you're shifting those things becomes such a pain because you've kind of stitched it all together in some way. So it just really goes back to just the basics of getting that player path, what's important, and then layer in those simple blocks of, I think this is important. I just need to get from A to B to C. And like,
Mm.
let's see how interesting that feels before I start putting in, population or figuring out where combat is,
Yeah.
what the cover looks like. It's just like, let me just get a fun walkthrough. Because if it's not fun just doing the simple stuff, then it probably isn't going to be too fun when you start adding a bunch of fluff.
Oh, for sure. And I think that's why, like, I don't know how you found it with your
Mm-hmm.
teaching on your class at the minute, mate. But when I have like people in my mentorship, how quick they are to just not do the pre-production or the planning, and you can see that as soon as the level comes through, because you're like, oh, if you just spent more time, like you said, just thinking about it, just
Mm-hmm.
putting it together, it's now going to cost you more time in redesign than
Yeah.
it is what it would have been just doing research, pacing, planning, 2D maps,
Yeah, I
what
mean,
have
because for me, like, I don't do too many 2D maps just because
you.
all the studios I've been at just don't do them. But on the other side of things, I love doing like really simple blockouts and then throwing that in Photoshop and doing some kit bashing of like they're using some images to try and get the feel of like what this will be. And that sometimes helps me kind of visualize, what a concept paint over could turn into. Or just
Mm.
if I'm trying to sell my level and so I've blocked something out that, and maybe there's something in the game I'd like to change, and so to sell them on that, I'll just like take some screenshots and try and do some kit bashing in Photoshop, to get that put together. Because that'll also just really help you do some quick like fake art, that doesn't really take up your engine time of just like putting in more geometry and more work with that.
Yeah, no, that's it. Everyone's got a different process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I enjoy doing a rough 2D map just because it helps me get a plan of it before I block out. Which doesn't mean again that is the only way or that's how everyone should do it. It just personally helps me go, oh, okay, like this is important here.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I need to think about there, and yeah, different
That's a good
approach.
that's a good point. Do you feel like the 2D maps are for you then? Like that's something just for you that needs to get your own ideas out? Because I never felt like I showed my like no one ever really saw the 2D maps I would do at Disney. So then I figured out like, all right, what am I doing these for? Let's just jump in the level and build it.
So like I noticed that my like LD got worse. So like because I
Hmm.
switched between both when I first started, had to do like some form of a 2D map or some form of a layout, and then I switched over to just being like, oh, I'm just going to block stuff out,
Yeah.
I just know, like, it just suffered. I mean, like I said, that's just for me. Like, I do show them off to people, but it depends on the pipeline, right? Some people
Hmm.
don't want to see it and don't care, and other ones they do, right? They want to review it before I get in and block it out. But yeah, there's like, it just is for me. As I mean, I have some people who don't use grid paper or anything like gridded. Like, I like to use that, especially when doing a 2D map, because it allows me to again plan the metrics out a bit more. So
Hmm.
then, and like, I know it's not going to translate. Like, say if I built a space that's 30 by 25 meters, and then when I get in and play as the character, it's probably going to feel either too small or too big, and I know
Yeah.
that. But it just helps me go, okay, well, that's what it was. Now I adjust to what the feeling is. Do I push it further back, make it wider, etc.?
Hmm.
But it just, again, it just helps me, get over that initial, how do I say, the, when you, that blank, blank canvas syndrome. That's the thing that
Yeah, that's a good point for people who are maybe struggling with their ideas when they're starting levels.
mm,
Like if you're in the 3D editor and you're just nothing you're putting together works really, maybe jump over to 2D, try some things. That's when I usually jump out to like reference images and stuff and just trying to find some shapes that
yeah,
make me like excited again about basically the idea of just like what am I building? I think that's you get less excited when you're just kind of wandering around and not really able to nail
yep,
down what you would like to do. Um, and so I really like that for kind of exploring new avenues. Maybe get the blood pumping a little bit like that
mm.
when you jump on the 2D to 3D, just back and forth.
And there's some great stuff there. Like when I do my 2D maps, like I use this thing either called like a dungeon scroller, which is just used for people who do Dungeons and Dragons quick layouts, but it's a nice tool that allows me to do that. Or there's stuff like for if you're planning like architecture called Floor Plan Creator. I'll send you links for these, mate, after, and I'll put for everyone else listening a link to these in the description down below. And again, it just, it's a different tool, but it just helps me quickly create something that looks nicer than my scribbles on my
That's dungeon scroll.
yes, let me send you a
Oh
link
yeah, no,
to
yeah, my students brought that up last week and we were playing around with it. That was really
ah
cool, like how many different things you can do. They also brought up
yeah,
this thing called grid paper, this website called
yes,
gridpaper-maps.tumblr.
yes, that one's brilliant. It's fucking
Mind-blowing
amazing.
overhead maps of like a million different
mm,
levels, and I think that's a really good way to kind of see how
yeah,
people build spaces. I think this would be really cool if you could click into it and like see like a perspective view
for sure, man. No, I think
of
that's
how that level turned out. But this stuff is really cool that didn't really exist back when. Like
yeah,
we were talking about this before, like level design is such a different part of of just making games where you just it's not as there's not as much info tutorials, like it's just
mm-mm.
not as easy to kind of understand what you need to do
Yeah,
until you just go to a studio, start doing it, and then every project you're just getting more familiar with that whole process of like starting in pre-production and then doing the final bugs to turn it in. Like just going through that motion, you're just going to get a better kind of perspective on how all this gets made, but most importantly what the things you look out for when you're making levels. Like you'll just get better at noticing what's good and
mm,
what's bad, because at first you're just blind to a lot of things that you're not kind of looking out for. And just the more games you make, the more you're aware of not only the level design but everyone's part in it, right? And how we can use those other teams to make our stuff
yes,
better. And I think that was one thing, like when I started out, a lot of stuff I did, I mean, probably for everyone, but just the scale, it's like it's always too big or too small. Like story of my
hmm,
life when I was starting out, and then you just get used to feeling those spaces out as that character playing. Because a lot of people ask me like, "Oh, what if they don't have the character ready for you yet?" Well, I'm just like, "Well, you usually have something, and then you just have to
yeah,
figure like you guess, and then when that stuff comes online, it's just up to the level team to fix it, like change the scale or shift
yes,
stuff around. Sometimes it just comes down to that, and they just know like, okay, we're gonna have to change this because it's not ready yet, right? So you just kind of eat that. You
for
just accept it.
especially with like mechanics, mate, because like
Hmm.
you tend to, and it shouldn't be like this, but it always tends to happen, right? You're always blocking out before you get the final mechanics,
Hmm.
and you're like, I think this would be great here if we get it, and then like I said, you find out it doesn't get it, but there's something else you can use, and you've got to
Yeah.
jump back into it.
What a joy it is when you work on a sequel to a game too, though, because then you have things to be used, and that's such an advantage for teams to kind of get the ball rolling, and you kind of already understand what's good and what works, and you have those mechanics ready, and so you're able to just go in, make some levels that really feel like they will later, and it's not as much rework or backtracking. So I really like that too.
Yeah, I mean, when I work on a sequel, mate, I'll let you know how it feels. I've never
Yeah,
worked on one
I
yet.
guess
So.
I'm trying to think. Like Disney Infinity, we did a lot of like
Mm.
continuing with the toy box, so the mechanics were all kind of familiar. And so after the Cars playset, I was able to do the Spider-Man playset. Funny enough, and in the Spider-Man playset, you're doing like sewers, of course. What's a game without sewers?
We all need sewers, mate.
And so, but a lot of that stuff was familiar, and so we were able to like iterate on that and understand it. And then on the third Disney Infinity, I was doing Star Wars. And so again, I'm still the same biped characters with similar mechanics with just the Star Wars flair put in there. But, it was there enough, right? We had a foundation of the game. And so you're able to just jump in and start building some interesting things and climb all over things and fight and shoot guys. And so I think those were really fun. I think that's why we ramped up on Cars 3. We'd already done Cars 2. We already had the car model from Disney Infinity. It's like all that stuff was just rocking and rolling. And then you get on Spider-Man and it's just tons of kind of figuring out like the combat's changing every week, right?
Mm.
Everything can change, like the swinging mechanics constantly being iterated on, changing, where Ratchet and Clank, now we're back in business for a game they've already done. We have all these assets just
Yeah.
sitting around that we can like at least prototype and block out with. So I'm just grabbing weird random old assets from things, trying to put levels together and make them interesting and sell the levels I had. And so it's definitely different depending on what project you're on and if they have some useful assets to use. Is this a sequel? Do they have like the mechanics worked out at all for the avatar and stuff like that? It all just changes, so we kind of just have to roll with the punches and find out. But I think it's definitely harder when you come from something brand new and you're just
Yeah.
you're designing while they're designing and everything is kind of happening at the same time.
For sure, man. No, I completely agree. I want to ask you, mate, like, do you have any sort of tips for any of those inspiring? Because obviously you're teaching right now as well. Do you have any for those of the listeners who are looking to get in or students of level design,
Yeah, it's really tough.
mate?
Let's see. I think I want to go back to is just like it'd be really good for you to start understanding how to talk about games, like how to talk about level design in games. I think that's one thing that not I don't see a lot of people talk about as far as people learning, because if you can break down what is good level design, then you're obviously going to get better at going to make that on your own. And so playing a game like God of War or Tomb Raider, Uncharted, and kind of looking at the space, trying to see some sort of gray box within that space when you're playing it, right? And then just breaking down those moment to moment pieces of gameplay so that you're understanding why the level team is putting that together in the way it is will start to really help, I think, a designer kind of make better work is when they're looking at how it's being done right now. So that's why I don't necessarily have time to just play every game that comes out, but at least go take a look at it and try and see what they're doing that's new, what they're innovating on, and what they're like expertly accomplishing on things that we've already seen before. Like that Horizon trailer. Oh my gosh, that is some crazy stuff. Did you see that?
Yeah, man, it looks great. I love how many stuff there is to explore with. Like that grappling hook now zips you across. They then teased out the glider as well. Like just how
Mhm.
you're going to move through that level looks great.
Yeah, I was just blown away. But not to get off topic on the tip stuff, but another thing I would say is try to master as much as you can within the editor and not just blocking out. I think we talked about a little about this before we started, but just there is a lot to level design. It is not just
Mm,
building a mesh of the level. You need to be able to tell a story that has gameplay involved in it in your level blockouts so that when you're pitching those ideas to the team or you're putting together portfolio pieces that stand out, they need to have some purpose. And the only way you're going to do that is to, learn some prototyping and some gimmicks and some scripting to mix in with your level blockouts. And so, we're not talking about becoming a programmer or an animator or an effects artist, but I'm talking about doing some simple prototyping with those type of things, getting some really simple
yeah,
mover movement in your blockouts to, just, set an area apart from just being this static image. I want to see like what you're thinking of in terms of movement and, placing some static mesh characters in there for scale is always really great. But just learning those things of like elevators, doors, checkpoints, like some very simple things so that when you build these levels, you have like an actual gameplay playthrough because you're not going to be delivering just these static geometry meshes to anyone, right? There's going to be this whole kind of bucket of things that you need to learn how to do eventually. So getting in there now and like jumping into Unreal or Unity and, you know, telling that story with your Blockout of just like, okay, your mission is to get from A to B to C. How do I sell that as a story? You know, is there some dialogue I can put in here? Can I just walk up to a cube and have some text pop up on screen? Like little things like that, just so you're getting used to developing these actual playable levels. And it's not just this like screenshot perspective view of this like geometry that, you know, I don't know what type of game you're making this for, so I don't know if it's good or not, right? So at that point, you're really just showing someone, you know, are you creating aesthetically pleasing looking level blockouts? That's still good. That's still really great, but there's a lot more to it, right? And especially when you dive into these portfolios and, you know, how are you good? How can I stand out to show an employer like I'm a good level designer? Well, I want to see GIFs of your level being played so I can see the context of what you're making. And so if little fake gameplay hints like that are being shown, then I know that you're thinking about, you know, what this game is and you're building things for the mechanics, right? And so it's really hard to do that if you're just doing screenshots of blockouts. And so I think we've seen a lot of that. Like you'll look at portfolios for design and level design, and it's just, there's just a lot of screenshots, or there's like, you know, student projects or even just game jam or indie projects or something like that of games you've worked on with other people, that none of that's really selling you as a level designer, right? You really there's like a whole nother like, you know, slew of stuff to go over when it comes to portfolios and how to put that together and what's important to show off. And it's pretty crazy. But I guess at the end of the day, you want to make interactive playable levels, and you can fake it until you can make it, right? So it's okay to fake it and make stuff look really rough. But if you're just thinking about that while you're doing your blockout, you're going to be in much better shape than someone who isn't really accounting for the actual game that's taking place.
For sure. And I have a great example of like someone who's on my mentorship course. He's doing one based in Tomb Raider. And he had like just a simple one where he stands, you know, because Tomb Raider can fire the arrows with the rope attached. So if he stands in this volume next to this pillar and fires the bow, then it just makes like a white like cylinder that makes it look like a rope just appear connecting them. And it works. It sells it. Yeah, sells it perfectly. So yeah, basic stuff. And I think also a lot of people have asked me like, oh, for a game design portfolio, what should I do? Not a design doc. Let's make that part like there. It should be that of like, can you prototype a mechanic for a game that you love? And just show the design thought process, show the mechanic like working, even if it's not, like I said, super sexy with animations and everything. But that sort of element of, okay, well, this is what it looks like here. This is how it would work here. I have this particle effect. Obviously, it would look more like this later, but just a simple one there. Again, you can really sell it, mate. You can really sell it.
Yeah, the dynamic playthrough of a level, like think about exactly what you mentioned. If that guy has a GIF of him playing through and getting to do that mechanic, I mean, how cool is that versus just someone you know, building a space for something like that to take place and nothing happens, right? So I've had students do really cool stuff like the Uncharted rope hooks stuff where I just have to jump in the air and hit a volume, and that will take me to the other platform like I'm using that mechanic. But as I'm using that to go around the level, you're getting a feel for the timing and the pace of it, right? So you know, faking those mechanics with just teleports is totally fine. You know, steps or climbing things, maybe you have a climb section you've highlighted with some visual language of the pieces that you'll be able to climb on. And then just if I approach your area and teleport to the top, it's like, great, I understand that I'm going to be able to climb that area, but now I'm up top and now I'm getting to enjoy some verticality to your level. And, you know, that's why you've got to fake that stuff. And so getting into the editors and actually just being able to do the simple stuff is going to go a long way, right?
For sure, man. Completely agree. And mate, I've just realized the time there, and I don't want to take, because we have such a time difference between you and I.
No, I think it's almost a quarter to 8 here, so I can go for a little bit more if you wanted to. Was there anything else you had in mind on your plate?
No, mate. I think honestly, this is a great episode just by what we've done, mate. Like, honestly, this has been fantastic just where we are, champ. Like, honestly, you know, almost 45 minutes long. It's been just a pleasure us going back and forth. I think we've talked about so much, man. Honestly, I'm really happy.
Yeah, it was really fun. You'll have to have me back sometime if you want.
For sure. Of course, mate. Of course. All right, then, mate. Well, I'll just do like the ending outro for this now, mate. All right. So just give me a second for this.
Sure.
So I just want to thank Shane for joining us. It's been an absolute blast having you on, mate. And for those who may want to reach out and get in contact with you, where can they do that, mate?
Yeah, you can just shoot me an email at, I guess, you caught me off. Should I do my CGMA one? Probably. I think it's, I just can't remember what that is. We'll look it up because I don't want to tell people the wrong one. Oh, yeah, it's just shane.canning@cgmasteracademy.com. So that'd be a fine one to reach me at.
Awesome, mate. Awesome. All right, then. Well, if you want to reach out to me and get in contact, you can do so via Twitter @MaxPairs, email into the show with your questions at leveldesignlobby@gmail.com, and we will catch you all next time.